it feels like this hamster wheel that I need to keep running on. Nothing is fun anymore. That's when I started to think about, should I leave? My last year at BuzzFeed, I got paid in total $625,000. How many people do you know walk away from a job that pays that much?
Welcome to Maker's Mindset. I'm your host, Nancy Twine. And in this episode, I'm in conversation with Vivian Tu, a former Wall Street trader, personal finance educator, public speaker, entrepreneur, and best-selling author. She's the founder and CEO of Your Rich BFF, which helps make the rules of personal finance accessible to non-experts and marginalized communities. She's also the author of the New York Times bestseller, Rich AF, The Winning Money Mindset That Will Change Your Life. She also hosts the top charting podcast, Net Worth and Chill. Let's go ahead and jump in. Welcome, Vivian. I am so excited to have you here today. I've actually been following you on social media for quite some time now. And one of the things I love about your platform is that you just make learning about personal finance so fun and engaging. And I personally have learned so much from you, which is why I have you here today, because so much of our audience, they're building their companies for the first time, or maybe they're scaling and they're fundraising. Or a lot of our founders too are also thinking about building their personal brand. So I feel like you have so much insight to share on all of those things. So let's hop into it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Of course. And we were actually just chatting.
I know, yes.
One of the things we have in common is we both started our career on Wall Street. I was at Goldman in sales and trading, and you were at JP Morgan, right? So what inspired you to leave your day job on Wall Street to become a full-time finance expert, educator, and content creator?
I feel like people don't get the full story. That's just like the quick cut, the quick jump. But I, started my career straight out of college as a trader on Wall Street. I was in the equities department, which is very known for they're called stock jocks. So it's pretty much a bunch of guys who went to Ivy League colleges, were on the football team, the basketball team, the lacrosse team, what have you. And I was the only young woman on the team. And I had an amazing mentor. I was so lucky. She was my first manager. She was the only other woman, the only other person of color on my team. And she took me under her wing and she was like, I'm going to teach you everything that I didn't know. And I felt so grateful to have like a big sister.
Yeah, you're really lucky because that's not common, especially in that business.
But obviously my luck came to an end. About a year and a half in, they fired the head of the desk. And you know what that means. Yeah. It's shake-up time.
Totally.
So half the desk gets let go. They bring in the new guy who's, hiring all of his old crony buddies. And suddenly overnight, it's a really different team. And I got reassigned to work under one of these new guys. And I thought this is going to be an exciting opportunity. I'm going to be able to make the new boss like me. It'll be fine. And I could not get one thing right with this new guy. He didn't like how I looked. He didn't like how my nails click-clocked on the keyboard. He didn't like how, he just didn't like the fact that I was a woman. And he didn't like who I was. And one day, the straw that broke the camel's back was I came into work wearing a long cardigan. And he looked at me, touched his hands together and bowed and said, "Is that a kimono?" And as a young Asian woman who is in a position of weakness, who is not in power, who does not have the ability to dictate, how much I get paid, my role on the team. I'm the youngest person there. I felt so helpless because somebody has just objectively said one of the worst possible things they could to me. And all I could say was like, leave me alone. And, you just feel your face get hot. And I kind of knew right then and there that it was time to go. So I ended up leaving this Wall Street job that I've always wanted, quote unquote. I'd been brainwashed into wanting. I left for BuzzFeed and I actually got that job through networking. My first mentor, her best friend, ended up becoming my first boss there. I worked in the digital media strategy sales team. So I was selling things as simple as just putting ads on the internet all the way to full-on joint ventures with Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies. And it taught me a lot because I kind of basically had to reinvent myself. It was my do-over, I call it. And
in a very different industry.
in a very different industry, but
Yeah.
also one where the values are very different. What makes a good trader versus what makes a good, salesperson in the media tech space are very different. And I had to do a lot of unlearning. But I was able to take my personal finance knowledge from job one, my social media and digital media prowess from job two, and smush them together. The reason I did it was because my best friend at work, she and I sat next to each other, and she would always ask me money questions. And our team and then the broader floor got wind that I was doing that. And then a line started to form at my desk.
No way.
Yeah, like during my lunch break, I'd be like shoveling a salad into my mouth. So I got the same questions over and over again. And I was like, this is so annoying. I would like my lunch break back. So I was like, I'll put on the internet. And when you have questions about budgeting, you'll look at video 7. When you have questions about investing, you'll look at video 15. And like, you can just like look at them. I did it for my 5 friends at work. It blew up. Very first video was on TikTok, 3 million views. And by the end of the week, I had 100,000 followers.
Wow. I mean, it's incredible. And actually, to that point, one of the questions that I get asked a lot from entrepreneurs is, when do I take that leap from full-time employee to full-time entrepreneur? And what did that look like for you?
So I actually was moonlighting for a year and 3 months before I took Your Rich BFF full-time. And it was the worst year and 3 months of my life. Yeah. So, not to say that it was as demanding as my job on Wall Street, but like, it wasn't like I had a 9 to 5 to begin with. Like, I was still in media and tech sales. So I'm working, let's call it 8 to 6, 8 to 7 most days. And I'm being compensated really, really well. Yeah. They're taking good care of me. I have no excuse as to why I want to leave. It got to the point where I was working Monday through Friday. All of Saturday, I would ideate content. And Sunday, I would then wake up bright and early, put on a shirt, film a video, take off the shirt, put on a new shirt, film the second video, take off, put on, and it would just go. And I would do 7 videos. Wow. And then I would release one by one each day of the week. It sucked because I was working 7 days in a row. And even when I was on vacation from my, W-2 job, I still had to do this job, right? This side hustle of mine. Yeah. And that wasn't great. Like, I do not recommend working 7 days a week for over a year and not taking a single day off, because you will burn out.
Yeah, you'll burn out and you'll do nothing well. You won't do your full-time job or your side hustle well, right?
No. And I told that to my fiance, and I was like, I hate my job. I hate Your Rich BFF. And he asked me the smartest question I've ever been asked. Did it ever occur to you that you don't hate your job and you don't hate your Rich BFF? You hate doing them at the same time? And I was like, that's right. I did like my boss and I did like my job before any of this happened. I did enjoy doing it at first when it was just fun and casual, but now it feels like this hamster wheel that I need to keep running on. Nothing is fun anymore. And that's when I started to think about, should I leave? Yeah. Should I take this full time? And that was a really scary proposition. My last year at BuzzFeed, I got paid in total, base plus commissions, $625,000.
Wow.
How many people do you know comfortably walk away from a job that pays that much? Like, that's a really great living.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was going into the great unknown. Like, I didn't know anybody else who did this for work, but I had essentially stowed away $100,000 to be able to make sure that I could pay my rent, buy groceries, live my life as if I still had a full-time job if this wasn't working. I also asked him, I was like, what if something happens and we have an expense I can't pay for? And he was like, lucky for you, we've been together, 4 or 5 years at this point. I'll take care of us. Don't worry about it. And to have a partner who is so reassuring and is your biggest cheerleader and wants you to do well, I'm so, so grateful and so lucky, because it wouldn't have happened without him. But I took the leap, and it has been the best decision.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, we have so many similarities, from doing the whole side hustle thing to, for me, leaving a great paying job on Wall Street was really hard to do. But when I had the support from my friends and family, and for you, your now fiance, it really makes all the difference, because you know that if something doesn't work out, you're going to have that support system. Completely.
And I think that's a big part of why a lot of founders either come from historically upper middle class or higher income level families. They come from situations where they may have a partner who can support them. They come from situations where they have a bailout if they need to.
So let's dig in there a little bit, because people who don't have that fallback, what do you think it's really important for people to have in order before they take that leap?
Like I mentioned, that $100,000 was my emergency on top of emergency fund.
And how did you come up with that number?
For me, I went through my year of expenses and I was like, okay, well, my portion of the rent is, XYZ. I think at the time it was like $2,500. So then I'm going to need roughly 30 grand for rent for the year. Okay. I still want to be able to live my life, take Ubers, take the train. That's transpo. Also, I have to think about, food, groceries bill, but also dining out, because I don't want my decision to take this full time to impact my ability to grab dinner with my friend. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, okay, well, also we take 2 vacations a year. I still want to be able to pay for half of that, because I don't think it's fair that even for the luxury discretionary stuff, my then at the time boyfriend bankrolls the whole thing.
Right.
And I think that got me to roughly, I want to say like 65 grand. Mm-hmm. And then I still wanted to have additional funds left over to actually pour into the business. So that was the additional kind of like 35. I was like, well, what if I need to get camera equipment? What if I need to do XYZ? And I need to host my website and maybe find time for a beautiful studio, or like there were costs with running that business. So I set aside that $100,000. It was going to take care of me for the year. And I was lucky. I didn't touch it. But I think for folks who don't have the safety net, you're going to need that even more than I did, because when it comes to it, what that safety net buys you is time.
Right.
Time to figure it out.
So switching gears a bit, when I think about what's changed the most from when I started my business over a decade ago, one, competition. It is very competitive out there. But then also, too, for my business, media effectiveness. And when I talk about media effectiveness, it's not just about having the dollars to spend, but it's really creating quality content and making sure that you're serving the right audience. And you have to do that consistently. And I feel like you've done that so well over time.
Thank you.
And what do you think it is about your content strategy that really engages with people and just makes them want more from you?
I didn't reinvent the wheel, right? Like I'm not the first person to create content about personal finance. If you want to go way, way back, you have the Dave Ramseys and Susie Ormans of the world. Mm-hmm. They spoke to a very specific generation, not ours. I would say probably my parents, maybe even a little older. And the tone that they approached things with was a bit more austere than I would say our generation is comfortable with.
Right.
Then you kind of got like the folks that came after that, which were a lot of books. So you kind of got the Robert Kiyosaki's, Morgan Housel's, and these are amazing folks. But again, they were book first people, or, kind of like they weren't blog people. They weren't creators in that way.
Right.
I felt like attention spans have gotten shorter and shorter and shorter as time has gone on. And so my first medium being a 60-second video felt so natural, because it went from, full-on personalities to books to YouTube videos of like the Graham Steffens. Now people can't even watch a 20-minute YouTube video.
Right.
They're like, I'm giving you 60 seconds of my time, teach me something. I felt like if there was a takeaway from every single video, and then I could actually tie it back to my life or somebody else's life, they'd actually be inclined to implement it. And I think that's why my content hits in a way that, other like brands may not, because it's so actionable. But I feel like the BFF part is just as important as rich, because no one has talked to you like an equal before.
Right.
It's always, I'm the professor, I'm lecturing you, or I'm your dad or your mom, or, your weird rich uncle who's just like, you're doing something wrong and you're making these mistakes.
Right.
I'm your friend.
Yeah.
I look like I could be anybody's best friend from college. That girl that you went out on with at Friday night is also the same person that you can talk to at brunch about your budget on Saturday. And that's what makes it so accessible because it's disarming.
Right, exactly. And you feel like the content just resonates in a different way. You don't feel like you're in a lecture hall, like listening to a professor. You feel like you're listening to your friend, and that also creates trust. And I think it also creates this perception that like, oh, I can do that, right?
And I think that's a big selling point too, is like, I always say like, I'm not special. I don't think I'm smarter than a lot of people. I think I'm average. But if someone who is like me, who is average, who is averagely good at math, averagely good at, managing my life, like you should see how messy my apartment is. Like if you are average, you can still be above average when it comes to managing your own money.
Absolutely, which is incredible. So I want to talk a little bit more about the Vivian Tu brand, because at the end of the day, you are your product, right?
This is the product.
How has your personal brand evolved since you started your Rich BFF?
Yeah, I think one, I've branded my videos pretty heavily. I think anybody can tell you that.
Yeah.
I'm Vivian, your Rich BFF and your favorite Wall Street girly. Like people literally yell that to me on the street. Like it's not just, hey, like, or anything. Like they're like, Vivian Tu, my favorite Wall Street girly. People will yell that to me on the street. And I'm like, it's working. Because when my branding is so strong that other people are saying it, it's the same way that when you think of brands like Nike, just do it.
It's sticky.
It's sticky. You know exactly what you're getting. And mine specifically, your Rich BFF. So your is like we instantly have a connection. Rich is, I'm about to talk about money, finance. And BFF is like that warm, inviting closeness. On top of that, Wall Street girly, I tell you that I used to work on Wall Street. That's credibility. And girly is like, now you know a little bit about who I'm really catering to. It's typically women, it's people of color, it's the LGBTQ community, it's people who grew up low income. Essentially, the group of folks who have never been served by financial content creators now or in the past. In roughly 5.5 seconds, if I'm talking quickly, I am able to tell you what I'm about to tell you, who I am, and what you're getting out of it.
Which is like marketing 101, but it also is just, what you need to really do to set yourself apart. And I loved what you said about, what you do. It's not just your platform. It's not just a business, but you're really impacting lives in a meaningful way. And I'm sure that must feel really good.
I think it's part of why I do the job. I started my career making incredibly rich people richer. I then went into making corporations richer in my second job. And now I get to make regular people richer. And the DMs I get are insane. They're like, because of you, I was able to negotiate down a $5,000 medical bill. You have basically saved me because I didn't have that money. I got a $20,000 raise at work because of asking the way you taught me to ask. This is life-changing money. Thank you. There are people who are like, I started investing in my Roth IRA because of you. And even the scarier comments are, you made a video about how I actually needed to invest the money in my Roth IRA, and I realized I'd been contributing for 6 years and had never invested it. It had just been sitting in cash in the account.
Wow.
Imagine if that person had never seen that video, and 34 years down the line, after having thought they had done the right thing for 40 years, they're like, wait, what?
Yeah, I mean,
It
it's
didn't
incredible.
work for me. And so to get that kind of encouragement is like crazy, but also it gives me purpose.
Yes.
And it serves the mission.
Completely. Wow. Well, more and more entrepreneurs are starting to think about their personal brands the same way they do their actual product.
Yeah.
Do you think it's important for founders to really invest in their personal brand?
Yes, 1,000%. The biggest free access thing founders have right now is social. It is a way to market your company. It is a way to market your brand. And people aren't happy just seeing the final product tied up with a bow anymore. They want to see the BTS behind the scenes. They want to see the struggles. Some of the best content that I've seen has been from founders being like, I have 48 hours to get XYZ done. We haven't started. I am about to be in the worst place ever. Like something is going wrong. Talking us through the story. It's like a movie. Right. You have conflict. You have, kind of the lead up, the climax of finally getting it done, making it happen, the adversity. And then you close it out and you're like, and now we have this amazing new product, new line, new offering.
So last year you published your first book, Rich AF, which is the definitive book on personal finance for a new generation. And you took so many of the lessons that you learned on Wall Street, that you were helping your colleagues out, and you turned it into a book that's really democratizing the wealth building process for so many people. So how did you leverage the content that you were creating on social media to ultimately become a New York Times best-selling author? I mean, it's incredible. How did you do that?
Thank you so much. I don't know what made me think this. I thought writing a book was going to be easy. No, let me just say this now. Publishers do not pay you to write books. They pay you to sell books. And the writing of the book was actually the easiest part because I had a 300-page single-space Word document of every video that I'd ever made, every podcast interview I'd ever done, every YouTube video I'd ever made, every thought that had ever crossed my mind,
Wow,
basically.
so you had the transcripts, you had everything.
I had everything. And so writing the book, I didn't start from a blank page like most authors do. I had a repository of stuff that I could use. Writing was actually okay. It was easy. But the selling and the marketing of the book was crazy. You have to come up with a full content outline of these are the days that I'm going to start promoting the book. This is the day I'm going to launch the cover. This is the day I'm going to offer pre-sale goodies. This is the day I'm going to do da, 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 da. And I felt like, as someone who works so hard to provide value for their audience, I was like, am I talking about my book too much? And you have to get out of your head with that because at the end of the day, I know that what I'm providing is a resource. Mm-hmm. This book is going to improve people's lives. And now that, the reviews are in, clearly that is the case.
Yeah.
But at the beginning, I was really nervous. I was scared. So we did a full 2 months into the drop date. We did content about the book nonstop for 2 months. And then I was making every attempt to get people to buy it, whether that was offering Zooms ahead of time, whether it was digital downloadables, everything. And then after the book launched, I actually went on tour.
That's right. I remember that.
Tour was awesome in that I loved seeing the besties IRL.
Mm-hmm.
It was an incredibly humbling experience to have people say to your face that you have helped them. Mm-hmm. Tour was awful in that I'm a homebody. I like to be sedentary on my couch. And instead, I was sleeping in a new city every single night. It wasn't working out good. Well, I wasn't eating right. It was on a plane probably 3 hours every single day. That's not good for you.
It's not.
And I felt very, very low when tour wrapped.
And it's tough, right? Because it's almost contradictory. People are showing up with tickets and they expect to see, the bright exactly. And inside you're like, oh my gosh, like this is just a lot. Because at the end of the day, we're human too, right? And we have to protect our energy. We have to refuel to be able to show up in our best form.
Yeah. And I will say, I am someone who can turn it on. Mm-hmm. Like even if I am just dying inside, the way I thought about it, I was like, someone has spent their hard-earned money, the money that they work at their day job and use to pay their bills, and has said, instead of buying a little treat, instead of saving it, instead of investing it, I am going to come to the show. I better knock their socks off.
Yeah.
And I think I did a good job with that.
Is there anything else that you've learned just about how to preserve your energy, what sort of wellness routine you need to be your best self?
Oh yeah, I've been leaning into JOMO a lot. So you've probably heard of FOMO, which is fear of missing out.
Yeah.
I now have joy of missing out. I grew up in an immigrant family. It always felt like the other shoe was going to drop. And I very much grew up with a scarcity mindset of like, work hard, take every opportunity given and presented to you because it may never come again. And for me, when I started Your Rich BFF, that's kind of what it felt like. I agreed to do every single interview, no matter how inconvenient it was for my personal life. I agreed to go to every single event, no matter how much I didn't want to go. But I'll give an example. There was an interview on like a late breaking news headline. And they were like, we need Vivian to be available at 8:30 on a Friday Friday evening. And I was like, well, I have like a 7:30 dinner reservation. And had you asked me, probably 2 years ago, I would have been like, let's cancel dinner and I'll do the interview. When I got that request, I was like, I have dinner plans. Sorry, I'm going to get this dinner one way or another. And when it happened, the first time I was so scared. But then the next day, I got another call to do another interview. And I realized that like the world kept turning.
Right, exactly.
And as long as I continue to do the good work that I'm doing, stick to my mission, fulfill that purpose, the calls will keep coming.
And protect your space, right? Because the calls are only going to keep coming when you can show up and be the Vivian that people expect you to be.
Correct.
Yeah,
and I can't be low energy, Viv.
Yeah, right. Totally. Well, going back to the book, you share so many incredible tips and hacks. And I will say for an entrepreneur, this book is a must read. But because I have you here in person, I want to pick your brain on just some entrepreneurial specific hacks. So what are some key financial principles that you think every entrepreneur should understand before even starting a business?
Yeah. So my guess is a lot of folks will kind of start out as a side hustle before they're like, oh, let me like go incorporate.
Yeah.
When you are making money as an entrepreneur, this is a lesson that I know many people have had to learn the hard way. Depending on where you live in the country, you're probably going to want to set aside anywhere between 25 to 50% of every dollar that comes in. So you get paid as a, graphic designer, you're freelancing, you are starting a small candle making company, you sell XYZ units. Every dollar that comes in the door, set aside, let's call it as an average, 30 to 35% of that dollar. So 35 cents goes into a separate savings account. And you're probably wondering why. Because, fun fact, when you work for yourself, you pay taxes 4 times a year.
That's right.
And the taxes are not taken out for you. At my W-2 job, there was a little portal and then you could go in and you look at your pay stub. And I would see the money that would come into my bank account every single month, twice. But it would also show, hey, we as a corporation have paid all of these taxes on your behalf. And then come April, you would true up with the government. Either you would get a little bit of money back or you would pay them a little bit. That's not how that works when you work for yourself. You have to be responsible and do that. And no one's going to tell you that. And I know so many, especially other creators, who got essentially to their first point and they were like, oh, I owe money on this? I don't just get to keep all of it? And it's like, no.
Wow, that's a really, really good one, for sure. And what about tips? So we set aside money for taxes, but what about people who are actually trying to also build their financial wealth while investing in their business?
Yeah,
it's a tough
one. This is a super tough question because I know so many founders who are like, I will pay myself a nickel so that I can keep reinvesting every single dollar back into the company. I think doing that in some instances can be beneficial because obviously you have more cash to put towards your business. But also, I think when you are living so bare bones in your personal life, it goes back to that energy conversation of like, are you actually able to show up at your 100% best every single day?
Right.
Do you feel safe in your housing? Do you have enough food to consume? Like, there's a lot of questions that we have to ask ourselves. And again, why founding is so much easier when you have and come from money.
Right.
Because you don't have to worry about that as much. What I say is like kind of like the most optimal point is paying yourself as little as possible to live comfortably. Not you're sleeping on the ground, air mattress style, but like you're living comfortably, but not lavishly.
Right.
And then every other dollar possible, try to funnel back into your business because that's your baby.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure it has every opportunity to succeed.
Really great perspective. So finding that happy medium.
Yeah.
Totally. So when I speak to so many of my founder friends or other entrepreneurs, there's typically these top two things that we're all dealing with.
Okay.
And one of them is people.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Because it is so hard when you're scaling a business. You can't do everything yourself. And at some point, you have to think about scale, and you got to bring on the right team to help you do that. And for you, your platform has grown so quickly in a relatively short amount of time. So you have to be thinking about your team. So talk to us about that. How does that look for you? And what's important to you when you're making that hire?
Yeah. So I hired my first full-time employee, I want to say like probably 9 or 10 months ago.
Okay.
I'm lucky because my business is being a creator first, and there are a lot of infrastructures in place already. So creators oftentimes have agents, managers, attorneys, business managers that handle like accounting, bookkeeping. And so those already existed. And I have all of those things, but they don't work exclusively for me. Unless you are like, I don't know, Oprah.
Yeah.
You likely don't get a manager who only works for you.
Right. And that's typical when
Very,
you're
very
still
typical.
building. Yeah.
But I'm lucky I have all of that representation to protect me. My attorney looks over my contracts to make sure I don't sign anything wonky. Management helps me kind of focus the business and also does a lot of liaising with client partners. My agents are the one out there actually hunting and getting me new business. And then my business manager obviously handles anything with a dollar sign in front of it. I also have a publicist. And these are all services that are available, but they're not cheap. That hiring is actually really easy because you can kind of assess the market, and there are reputable agencies, there are reputable management companies, reputable attorneys, reputable firms. That wasn't that hard.
Yeah.
And I thought that that's how it was going to be forever. No. When you are hiring internally, someone who works just for me at my company, Your Rich BFF, it is excruciating. When I hired my first employee, I was really excited. She had come through, a headhunting agency like many good employees do. And I was really excited, but it didn't end up being a good match, a good fit at all. And I didn't really even think of like, do I let this person go until I realized how much time having a bad employee was costing me to basically redo their work. And so I was like, listen, like this isn't working. We parted ways. I'm very lucky now. I have one full-time employee. She is the bee's knees. And I always joke the way that I found her was so strange. I was FaceTiming my mentor, my very first boss. She was at a dinner party and I was like complaining. I was like, I just let go of an employee. Like I'm on my own again. I'm just so overwhelmed and underwater. And from the back of this dinner party, just like a man appears in this FaceTime and he yells, "My niece needs a job." And I'm like, okay, like not a strong start. Like that seems a little desperate. But turns out she had just graduated from, a master's program, was looking for work. We ended up, chatting, meeting up a couple times. I was much more thorough with my interview process. It was a lot longer than I had for my first one. I made sure it was the right fit. And she's been with me ever since.
It's incredible.
She's my right hand. She's the best.
And I love so many of the things that you said because it really contextualizes that common phrase that we hear, which is hire slow, fire fast.
Yes.
I know it sounds harsh, but when you hire, you really have to be so thoughtful about every aspect of it. It's not just about someone's resumes, but it's really, even back channeling references, trying to figure out who do you know that person's worked for, because they're not necessarily going to always give you the full, spectrum of references. And then I think another really important thing is hiring for values too.
Yeah.
Because there are some great people that do have the experience, but if they're not aligned with how you do things and what you value, then that can also not work out. So I think that's so important. And thanks for humanizing that for us, because I feel like it's something that doesn't get talked about a lot. Obviously, it's a sensitive thing, but so many people are going through it.
Yeah. And people is by far, you probably know so many founders. You are a founder yourself. Like every single founder that I speak to, they're like, people's the hardest part. And
it
you
is.
can't outsource it.
Right.
Because sure, you can outsource to a headhunting agency or, once your corporation becomes large enough, like even hire an HR team. But at the end of the day, you as the person, in my case, whose face is on the door,
Right.
it's got to be a vibe.
It does.
And I'm so lucky, I don't even see my current assistant as an assistant.
Mm-hmm.
She's a junior producer.
Right.
She's going to be my COO. There is a career trajectory for her because she has displayed interest, but also shown me that when I need her to, she rises to the occasion. And when you find someone like that, make it hard for them to leave.
Right.
I am going to continue to pay this person so much that they are not going to be able to find other work to stay with me, then just leave me.
Right.
Because I want them to enjoy their job so much and find the perks of the job to be so cool and feel like they're being paid above market. I'm not going to let someone else take that person that I worked so hard to find. And I think a lot of corporations and frankly, sometimes founders don't realize this. They're like, I'll give you a pizza party on Friday. It's like,
right.
The pizza party isn't going to keep people around. What's going to keep people around? Paying them their value, showing them that they're valued, making sure that they see their worth and they know you see their worth. Because when that happens, they don't have a reason to leave.
Completely. I love that. I love that. So the other challenge that we talk a lot about too is fundraising. And it has been a really challenging fundraising environment. And especially when you're scaling a business, it's a huge distraction too, right?
Yeah.
So for women specifically who are looking to fundraise, is there any advice that you can give on how to set yourself up for a really good pitch?
So I think the very alarming stat, and correct me if I'm slightly off on the number, but I believe all women teams get less than 2% of all funding, VC funding. And that just gives me the ick.
I know.
Because why is that possibly the case when the vast majority of household CEOs are women? The people who have that purchasing power, the people that marketers talk to are women. You want our dollars, but aren't willing to give us any?
Right.
To actually then build the companies and products that we will then be using? I think that's weird.
It is.
But I do think that values-based fundraising is so important. These days, the money's, of course, very critical, but there are so many different sources of those funds that are oh, by the way, we also specifically want to invest in diverse founders. We want to invest in companies addressing underserved communities or needs that other people haven't thought about yet. And I was having a conversation with Arlen Hamilton, who's an incredible powerhouse in the space. And she was just I have constantly been underestimated because of how I look, because of who I am. But now that I'm in the power seat, just because someone has an accent or doesn't use proper English doesn't mean their idea and their business is any less valuable. I am able to see through it. And because of that, I am able to make investments that people wouldn't even realize are investments. And I think that's so powerful.
It is.
So when you are a founder yourself, I think it's finding funding that sees that value. There are more and more VCs popping up that specifically cater to women founders, that specifically cater to companies that address women's needs. And there's nothing wrong with playing for those pots that, the historically Patagonia vest crew can't play for.
Right.
The way that I see it is the same way that Wall Street recruiting happens. It's yes, there's the open pool, but also if you are a woman, there are earlier recruiting pools specifically catered to women. There are earlier recruiting pools catered to people of color, to the LGBTQ community. Our diversity of identity, but also idea and also skill is each of our superpowers. And we need to lean into that.
Completely. So well said. So well said. So Vivian, I imagine that every now and then when you have your JOMO moments and you're just hanging out on your couch, you're thinking wow, this is crazy what I've been able to do with my life. I mean, you had a vision, you went after it, and you just pursued it fearlessly. For those people out there that may be struggling with finding that belief in themselves, or maybe it's just hard for them to comprehend, how can I change my life so drastically? What advice would you give to them?
That the best day to start was yesterday, but the second best day is today. I always joke, I'm on my third do-over. And I know so many people who are like, well, I don't want to go back to, law school. That's going to take 3 years or 4 years or whatever. It's like, well, the time's still going to keep passing, babe. In 3 years, are you going to still be right here, hating your life, wishing you had gone back to law school? Or are you going to be 3 years from now with a law degree, ready to start a job as an attorney and really excited about? The time's going to pass anyway, so you might as well just do it scared.
Well, before we wrap up, we're actually going to head into one of my favorite parts of this. It's 5 fire facts.
Okay.
And it's a rapid fire interview for our audience just to get to know you, just candidly. Are you ready?
Okay.
I'm ready. Your role model in the finance or entrepreneurship world?
This is like very old, but like Mickey Siebert was the first woman to hold a seat on the New York Stock Exchange.
Wow.
Someone who is like probably like more alive.
Yeah.
I would say, I think Sarah Blakely is very, very impressive. I think something that really stuck with me is the fact that she didn't tell anybody about Spanx for a very long time until she was like, they can't tell me not to do it if they don't know. And that's kind of where I felt like with your Rich BFF. I didn't tell my parents for the first 9 months.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. I hit it.
Wow. One financial myth you'd love to debunk?
That investing is only for rich people. How do you think the rich people got rich, babe? Like, you have to invest.
Your favorite quote or mantra about money?
Oh, my mentor gave me this one. She said, you can only save as much as you earn, but you can always earn more money. And that has changed my perspective. I think as women in particular, we are often very much targeted with the, don't buy the avocado toast, you're a shopaholic, no coffee for you. But it's like, you know how hard it is to cut out $5,000 of discretionary expenses? So hard. You don't have Netflix anymore. You're not getting drinks with friends. Like, forget those new shoes. But you know how easy it is to ask for a $5,000 raise? Happens every day. And if you put in about 2 hours of legwork and get a $5,000 raise because you prepped and organized what you were asking for and the reasons you deserved it, you're making, on a per hour basis, $2,500. That's a great return on your time.
Completely. All right, last, the most surprising feedback that you've received from a follower.
Most surprising feedback?
Yeah.
I think the feedback has been hard to digest sometimes. A lot of times it's just questions. And then sometimes people will say things like, you talk too fast, which fair, I know. But when you're on a limited time, I think that's probably just, part of the issue. But I would say for the most part, the feedback I largely get is just follow-up questions, which I'm really happy about because that means they're actually bought in and interested, and then I'll do follow-up videos.
And hopefully you're directing people to the book also.
Yeah.
And speaking of the book, where can our audience buy Rich AF?
Yeah, so you can get Rich AF, The Winning Money Mindset That'll Change Your Life, wherever books are sold. If you want to just have an easy way to get a link to it, just type into your URL richaf.me, like M-E, richaf.me. I did make the URL for my book website a manifestation because I think everybody deserves to be rich.
I love it. Thank you so much, Vivian. This was so insightful and I had so much fun chatting with you.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
To stay connected with Vivian, the Maker's Mindset community, and me, check out all the details in the episode description below. And check out Spotify or Apple Podcasts to hear a few bonus reflections from me on this episode. And don't forget to subscribe to this series, leave a review, and share this episode with your community. Thanks so much for tuning in.